It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday we are going to do an in-depth examination of society prefers women, okay? And I actually dug into the data because this keeps coming up. People keep talking to me about this. I keep hearing from guys I know to be good guys that they either believe this or they understand why other guys believe this, even if they themselves do not. And I do believe them that they do not. But some guys who I know are good guys do. So I dug into the data and it was interesting. Let's get into it after help support this channel. Because you know what? I know I'm going to take some shit for this. Well, I suspect I'm going to take some shit from this. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. I'm toying with doing more Patreon-specific content. Partially because I just am tired of the YouTube bullshit. But I don't know. I'm still thinking on it. But this is me not being wonderful, right? And that's the root of the society prefers women narrative. The best I can find is rooted in a previous women are wonderful theory. That's the name given to I believe it was a series of studies called the Women Are Wonderful Effect. Now, fair warning, these were psychological and sociological papers. So there's a replication issue going on here. Whenever you see psych papers or sociology papers from the 1990s, the replication crisis is real. But this is still the root of it, as best I can tell. That still stands. But there were researchers at Northwestern University where in the early 90s, the paper came out in 1994. But based on studies in 1989 and 1991 that reflects an emotional bias towards women regarding positive attributes when compared to men. What does that mean in English and not academies? Basically, that female stereotypes tend to be more positive, and the gender gap is vast in this. So female respondents or women respondents tended to have a much greater women are wonderful bias than male participants did. Now that, open and shut, right? Now this is not so. It's more complicated than this. Hence me thinking it was interesting enough to deal with being called a pick-me for giving any credence to this theory by, those sorts of feminists, and then being called, I don't know, a bunch of things from, the more manosphere leaning types that only agree with me when they think we're just dunking on Haas and Piker, which no, that's not the point of my criticisms against that dude. So where it gets complicated is that subsequent data has called into question the original paper's check on whether this is just benevolent sexism, whether it's just a preference for women who stay in traditional gender roles. The original paper said, no, this is across the board, no matter how traditional or non-traditional women are. That has been called into question since this data came out. The first issue is that this data was done on university students. And we know that people tend to be sort of more progressive in their beliefs when they're younger, and it sort of slides to more conservative as they get older. Right now, the most conservative demographic in both Canada and the United States is 55 to 64-year-olds. Late boomer. Well, no, I guess that's earlier Gen X. But, young men tend to be more progressive than any of their older cohorts. And, 89 to 91, kind of a significant period in history. But certain things, a bias towards assuming women are angelic and nice and kind, that's been consistently affirmed. That is real. Now, women are more likely to say it than men. But then this idea that, no, that persists even as women step away from traditional femininity, that's not so clear. Furthermore, and this is the part I went, interesting. Furthermore, the gap seems to have less to do with actively positive attitudes towards women and more to do with actively negative attitudes towards men, meaning the idea that men are predatory, dangerous, violent cheaters. So the problem for the manosphere on that one is you can't both say that we need things to get better for men while continuing to perpetuate this, society just prefers women argument. You can't merge wanting things to get better for men with the Andrew Tate pickup artist bullshit. Because Andrew Tate is a shining example of negative but accepted stereotypes about men, meaning he objectifies and misuses women, using this veil of machismo to teach other men how to manipulate and abuse women for sex. Now, the gotcha about Andrew Tate's business model is he was making money off of, classes and off of chat lines, like basically online, like cam shows, not quite that, but you know what I mean? Like the model was give men information where if it worked, they wouldn't need his other services. But what ended up actually happening is that men followed Andrew Tate's advice, got a horrible reaction, got more ostracized, and then ran back into the not loving arms of one of the women working these services that Tate was also running, right? I don't know if he's still running them. I don't know how his legal situation has affected that business. But the point is, if Andrew Tate's advice worked, he would be putting himself out of business. No one does that. You gotta look where the money's coming in. And I mean, this is true of feminist stuff too. The reason I'm not big on the gendered Duluth model is because if it worked, we'd have seen these rates going down. And the only rate that the Duluth model can prove has gone down is after someone takes a Duluth-oriented course. Men take a Duluth-oriented course. After they've already had their first brush with the legal system, men who take these courses are less likely to reoffend than men who don't, by a significant degree. The problem with that is we don't know if the men who didn't reoffend were just so scared shitless of their experiences with the legal system. They're like, I'll do fucking anything. I'll just do whatever you tell me. I never want to go to prison again, right? Does that mean the attitudes have changed? Well, maybe not. Does that mean the attitude was ever the problem to begin with? And, hey, maybe these guys are just avoiding women completely. We don't know, right? We don't know. The idea that the Duluth model is men are the dominant power figures and women are the oh poor wee lambs. This is an example of the women are wonderful phenomenon, right? It's less about society seeing women as actively good and more about society seeing men as actively bad. So, if we want things to get better, we have to chuck this out, because normalizing the bad men leads to bad men being centered and getting away with it more. Hopefully that makes sense, because here's the kicker. Here's the big bit of data that I found very, very, very interesting. Societies with more gender equality tended to have a lower women are wonderful factor. Meaning, places with more gender equality didn't have the negative stereotypes about men, as opposed to, thinking women were less good. This is it's another psychology paper, unfortunately. It's from 2018. It's called Catching Up with Wonderful Women. The Women Are Wonderful effect is smaller in more gender egalitarian societies. And so, that kind of makes sense, where you see these big issues with, this being a particular culture war in the UK and the US, countries that have lower and declining gender equality stats than countries like, say, the Nordic countries, or even countries that are seeing real, advances. People have hope in terms of advancement of women. The other red flag I caught in the data is that they're lumping, in more modern studies, they're lumping women, non-binary, and trans people together, which trans people erases trans men. Trans men are still men. And I say this as somebody who works with trans men, and you can't treat them like not men. Like, holy crap. That's so bullshit. First of all, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. These guys are guys. Anybody who has worked with a trans dude knows they're guys. They're guys. They just are. And if you don't treat them like men, you are emasculating them. That is bad and disrespectful. We focus all this on trans women and what fucking bathrooms they use. And so, what do we do about these negative stereotypes about men? Because the idea, what never came up in any of this data, but is certainly inferred, is the primary reason that, people, mostly men, see this idea that society prefers women is based on the messaging that women should be protected and safe, right? Now, the reason I'm stressing this so much is because we can't both go, oh, men need rights and we need to work on this, and both go, society prefers women. Because that's causing people to look at the fact that, what's going on here. And it isn't the fact that society prefers women. It's that the negative stereotypes about men are centered and accepted and seen as normal. And so any man who starts behaving in a non-stereotypical way in that model is seen as a better person, but a less good man. See the problem? And this is where we get into the the thing that is very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, the idea that benevolent sexism is not something that affects men. Men are only exposed to the hostile form of sexism because, and this is why the people who say this women are wonderful effect is just benevolent sexism, because the gendered stereotypes about men that men suffer under, they're all negative. Men are dangerous, men are violent, men are rapists, who just think they'll get caught. This is not stuff I believe. These are the stereotypes. All men cheat, they'll abandon their kids, their emotional children, all that shit. These are negative stereotypes that are normalized, And yes, there's the implication that men are strong and therefore frightening. But it's not a positive connotation, right? Then you've got the stereotypes about women of, oh, poor wee lamb, ooh, small, right? And these are the stereotypes that I have been dealing with my entire life because and this is where growing up, where I grew up, really had an impact on me. Because going back to Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman speech, we know that these positive stereotypes about women do not get applied to Black and Latina women the same way they're applied to white women and Asian women. And that's why Sojourner Truth back in the day said, ain't I a woman? So we can't even say the women are wonderful effect applies to all women, just certain women, just the women. And I've had a lot of guys say to me, and they're not wrong, this is not a criticism, but they say, you don't benefit from the social preference for women because you're womaning wrong. And the minute you have that, it's not about a preference for women. It's not presumed of all women. This women are wonderful bonus is only applied to women who stay in their fucking lane of womanhood. And that, you can think about it as, like the Final Fantasy license system. You have to level a skill, but you also have to get the license to use the skill. And we've turned womanhood into the same thing. The problem with that, well, one, sorry, transphobes, it means there's more to gender than just, they can't even determine whether it's gametes or what's between their legs. Because, the UK courts went, we've determined that sex for women is biological. Did they determine what biological sex means? Because what if somebody's a, fully transitioned trans woman who did the vaginoplasty? Do they count as women now? Is that what they mean? Is it about genitalia or is it about gametes? What does biological mean? And I talked to people last week anybody whose arm's like from government is going fucking crazy in the UK because they don't know how to implement that without violating like 12 other human rights things. People need a place to pee. You can't just take this shit away with, we'll solve the problem. But this is very masculine thinking, isn't it? This is toughness. This is, things are getting done with that. We're cruel, but it's good for you. And I disagree. I am a Superman and Captain America masculinity girl. Yeah, there's no perfect solution to anything. And part of the reason I'm so not girl is that the role models I followed growing up, the X-Men had a profound effect on me. And none of those guys were ideal men, right? Because they were mutants. And it was all about doing the right thing no matter what. And then it became a question of what the right thing was. And so, Magneto thought the right thing was acts of terrorism to, make your point. That sounds really bad when you put it that way, right? But Xavier did let people get away with shit and was seen as weak at times. But of course he was allowed to be weak, right? Because he couldn't walk. So he had that permission. And then we get back into the post-World War I structures where the propaganda after World War I got very muddled. And the government knew this was a problem. I think it was 1946 that the hearings on the mental health of soldiers returning from war, they knew there was going to be a problem. And the idea was throw them into a very constructed masculinity where men went out and provided for their family and women stayed home with the kids and were a source of refuge. But there was this message because, you know, a lot of guys from World War I especially came back not just mentally fucked up. The warfare in World War I did horrible things to the body. Like, not only limbs, men were missing pieces of their face. Look up the masks that they wore attached to glasses to hide the pieces that were missing. And the idea was that, no, you're supposed to care for these men because they serve their country. They're very brave. But this fell into conflict with the constructed masculinity that got even bigger after World War II and got even bigger with Vietnam, that to be a man was to provide, not to be cared for. And people who studied combat traumatized soldiers were going, no, you have to detach masculinity and bravery and nobility from physical prowess because, you know, there's men who are injured and can't do that. Think about what that's doing to them. But the Cold War, the propaganda for the Cold War, Rambo, right? Like Rambo, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Beefcake Cinema, raw muscle dudes. Like, we punch things. We are strong. America strong. Apes together strong. No, that came later. But they knew it was fucked up. They knew it. But they kept pushing it because the people in charge of the propaganda were more concerned about communist containment than what they did to the men who served. And this was all about fucking men. Nobody gave a shit about the women in this equation. Women were caregivers. Women were just supposed to, oh, they're there. And if a man got angry, if a man got sad, they're there. They're there. They're there. That's it. If he beat you, well, you didn't there well enough. Do women matter in this equation at all? No. Women are accessories for men in that model. So here we go with this smaller and smaller and smaller category of real men. So there was a way to be an ideal man. The window just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And women, there was no right way to be a woman and have any ambition or want to accomplish anything except for caring for men. That was the way they decided to solve this problem of wartime post-traumatic stress. And it didn't work. This is the important thing. These things didn't work, and they knew they were probably not going to work, but government determined it was the most expeditious thing. What the experts in the 1940s were saying, ironically, is that we need to destigmatize mental health struggles. We need to allow men to talk about it. We need to allow women to talk about how hard it is to be nothing but a caregiver. But it was really focused on the men who had this layer of trauma and this layer of horror. And then they come back, and the type of masculinity that's being idealized is something they can't participate in because they can't go out, and they can't be strong and they can't provide for their families. They're being taken care of because that's what women were told to do for injured soldiers. They were enforcing the women as refuge thing. And that's part of where women are nice and kind and nurturing. That's where it came from. Because if you go back before the wars, you go to like the adventure serials and things like that, the depictions are very different. Even up until the 30s, the interwar period, you still had more diversity of women in media. It narrowed, and then we got second wave feminism. That it was a reaction to getting kicked out of jobs, that women decided, hey, I kind of like earning my own money. Funny that, But it became this reaction instead of understanding that a lot of the issues, yes, they went way back to, imperialism and all that stuff, but a lot of this was a reaction to war. And so all the things that the second wave feminists were talking about a lack of bodily autonomy and the domestic abuse that happened at home. Because, hey, if a woman's supposed to be your refuge and your bad feelings aren't going to go away, well, those men coming back from war were basically taught that, hey, that means your woman's not womaning well enough. And maybe people went, oh, well, yes, that's suboptimal. But it was seen as, well, the thing they used to say back in the day, I'm old enough to remember this, well, he had to tell her twice. And that was what people said about a woman with a black eye. Yep, we're not that far from that paradigm, right? And so stereotypes are a lagging indicator of change. And with the ebb and flow of people, yes, we are getting people into, North America, which, Mexico and Canada are ahead of the US in terms of equality on a lot of metrics. Because yes, Mexico and Canada are part of the Americas. Thanks. South America is the Americas. But you've got this influx of cultures that aren't equal. And so, yeah, you're bringing this men are dogs attitudes that do change. I've seen them change, and the problem is the more conservative and the more unequal and the more denying of rights, just trying to keep women, be in their proper place, not keep them down. But the more this traditionalism becomes dominant in certain pockets of culture, the more this negative bias against what's normal for men, according to the data, it gets worse. So we can't traditionalism, we can't conservative out of this. If you don't like the negative bias against, men's virtue, egalitarianism is the solution, according to the data. Means get on board with DEI, guys. And this is where like everything I just said lost people on that point. Ask yourself why. Because I do think that we talk about internalized negative stereotypes in women. And it's true. If you grow up your entire life being seen as a default victim, And if your attractiveness makes you more at risk, and I think that might be why I'm less scared of men than a lot of women are, because it's like, no, I have never been so desirable that a man can't help himself. More often I hear how repellent my personality is, and so, femcel, fuck off. But I never grew up assuming that the things that made me desirable also made me at risk, because I grew up being told that absolutely was nothing about me was desirable except for my intellect, and even that wasn't good enough. So I wasn't raised with that fear, because this is going to be harsh to hear, but I grew up in the generation of you're too ugly to rape. And whenever you hear a guy go, she's not my type, which, yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that too. And it may be true, but, that's part of the problem, that women's desirability, it's strictly whether men find you attractive. And that's why guys go, she's not my type. But there's actually reasons to be relieved by that. But the problem is that women who don't fill that function in a less equal society are seen as having absolutely no value. And so they're treated terribly. Going back to the Black and Latino women, part of the reason the Met Gala being very Black this year is important is because Black women were centered in Vogue, in the Met, in culture, not Black culture, not counterculture, fucking culture. They were depicted as beautiful. They were depicted as centered, and they were bringing back boobs, man. There was so much cleavage. Like, there was double cleavage. There was so much cleavage. Like, boobs are back. Boobs are back, guys. Boobs are back. And it's Black America that brought them back. And I think that maybe, gaming should start looking at the way the women at the Met chose to depict themselves, because a lot of them were paying homage to Eartha Kitt and Josephine Baker. And, the way gaming decided to solve its alleged sexism problem by just eliminating the desirable female form from gaming, that's not helping. That's not helping. That's shoving women back into the angelic nurturer stereotype or the worthless stereotype. There's no aggressive, powerful, get what you want, except Assassin's Creed Shadows. Oh my God, women like that are everywhere in that game. And I'm like, yeah, baby. They're very morally complicated. But getting back to men to close, because I'm already running long. The problem, okay, if we have worked to disabuse a lot of the negative stereotypes for women. Unsuccessfully in a lot of ways. The whole bitch thing is still around, and reclaiming that word has not worked. Because if you're not wonderful, you're a bitch. And the minute you're a bitch, you're not a woman anymore. You're this other gender. Your gender is bitch. So you don't get all these protections that the wonderful women do. Welcome to my fucking life. That I have never, the number of times I have been physically assaulted, the number of times I have been groped. I won't even call the groping sexual assault, because I don't want to, that means like I've been sexually assaulted dozens of times. And I don't necessarily want to think about it that way, even though, yeah, by modern standards, that's what it was, right? You know, I had a dude like pose for a picture with me at San Diego Comic-Con. I was cosplaying Brandy from Liberty Meadows, the Frank Cho character. I've got a Jen back there. It's a white t-shirt, jean shorts, and Ked running shoes, for God's sakes. A guy grabbed me like open wall kissing, like face hugger kissing. Like I could still smell the stale booze on his breath. And he just walked away, ha 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 ha. And full view of security, who did fuck all. And when I looked at them, I'm like, do you want to file a report? You have to go there. It's like, will you come with me to file a report because you saw it? I can't leave. Don't fucking tell me I'm protected when shit like that. I can still remember the way that fucker smelled. And we can go, cosplay is not consent. Cosplay is not consent. All we want. And that's just one of the ones that I can talk about. You know, there have been times where I have had to get scary with guys because I've had the cornered in the elevator experience. You know, the number of times I was physically, like, no sexual connotation, just shoved or kicked or hit while on the job. But I was crew. So that's like, you're one of the guys. And so, yeah, you got to take your dings. Like, don't tell me there's some bubble of protection that society puts on women. Society only puts that bubble on certain women who accept that they are prey, who submit to victimhood. If you step out of that, if you want to be a sound person, if you want to be somebody who hauls cable, if you want to be somebody who gets in and gets dirty on the job instead of just having a glam squad, well, you're doing that, recognizing you get no protection now. If you get hurt, if you get assaulted, you're on your own. Oh, you got assaulted at San Diego Comic-Con? Well, you shouldn't have dressed that way. That's why I talk about how I was dressed. Because when I'm cosplaying Poison Ivy, when I'm cosplaying Ivy, I love, see, this is why I love cosplaying the dommy chicks, right? Because you can just go, and guys do not fuck with you. You get the step on me mommy dudes. I love the step on me mommy dudes. Like, oh my God, Poison Ivy, Power Girl Ivy, like the step on me mommy dudes, they'll get down and they'll like bow to the queen and you have no problems. Nobody fucks with you. Nobody fucked with me when I was dressed as Knockout. Because these are all, I will snap you in half, squirm, right? I loved those costumes. You know, putting Amanda Palmer in a headlock was fun as Power Girl. Those are fun. I dressed as the girl next door, the nice girl, and all of a sudden guys decided to take liberties, to say the least. When I dressed as nice, that's when I had the most problems. So this whole, what were you wearing? Were you leading them on? You know? No, it's this looks like a girl who won't scream. This looks like a girl who won't fight back. Oh, the chick with boobs out to here? No, she'll probably do something if I make a move. And so you gotta stop being nice. You gotta have that don't fuck with me energy. But the minute you do that, you're less attractive. No, you are. Because, you know, there's this fantasy. But what guys want in fantasy is not what they want in reality, which is another thing the more manosphere end of gaming says. And yes, you know, women like Ivy are scary in real life. You know, she's ultimately a good person, but she's done a lot of terrible things. And you do not get guys approaching you when you have that energy. I have that energy. Like, is this natural? Is it my natural personality coming through? Or because of where I grew up, we didn't have that protection because it was a black or brown neighborhood. And by brown, I mean like people from like El Salvador, Venezuela, places like that. So this women are protected, women are preferred, not so much. only certain women are given lip service to protection. But when it comes right down to it, if they're not going to help a woman in jeans and a t-shirt and running shoes because they thought, well, you shouldn't have been there. No, women don't get protected by society. What we've got going on here is that the actively negative stereotypes of men are centered. And men are constantly having to prove that they're not that negative stereotype. Well, women are constantly worried, well, he could turn into that at any moment. And the whole problem about wanting and needing to be protected by men from men is women spend their entire life afraid of their protector. Now, I'm somebody who, prefers men I can pick up and throw over my shoulder. Literally, I did that in high school. I picked guys up. I was a freaking tank, man, because I was competitive dancing and a cheerleading base. I could pick up pretty much anybody. I was like Tash in school, like, boom, right? Did it make me feel safer? No, because that doesn't protect against a knife. It was just kind of funny. It was what I was doing. My body became what it needed to do. I couldn't find jeans that fit because my legs were so like Simone Biles legs, like not quite like that, but you know what I mean. Man, she looked good at the Met. She looked good. I like that they showed off her legs. She looked good. Everybody looked good. But was it unfeminine? Yeah. I mean, I got labeled a lesbian, but that wasn't just because of the way I looked, right? There was activities involved there. But still, right? If men are constantly being pulled into the gravity of these negative stereotypes and constantly having to prove you're not that guy today, that's the problem we have to solve. And that isn't solved by society prefers women. Why? Because now you seem aggrieved. You're angry. You're dangerous. See how stereotypes work? The only way out of this is to start pulling normalized masculinity away from the bully that's on our side. What happens when he's not? To a guy who's not a bully and a society that does not reward bullies. And that's why I was checking people in the comments who were dunking on Hassan Piker and calling him like a soy boy and a low T. No. We don't fucking do that. I can't eat meat. I can't. Because part of my lower intestine is destroyed. I cannot digest meat. I eat tofu. Do you think you could take me? If no, stop using that. You can eat a lot of soy and still be aggressive as fuck. Right? So don't give me that. Don't. We don't do that here. We don't like the same person, therefore we can call them a bunch of names. No. That's not helping. We do Superman shit here. We do Spider-Man shit here. Spider-Man's taunts are clever. Spider-Man doesn't go, "Oh, you look fat today, Mysterio." No, it's clever, right? It's we do Captain America here. And that's for a reason. Because I am actively combating the normalization of negative men. I am actively combating the idea that the state of goodness for men is temporary and that the reason women become not good is they're tarnished or sullied by men. We all have good and bad in us. And there has to be a reward structure for being the type of man we know should be the center. But that means there have to be punishments for men who don't meet that mark. You gotta earn it. Everybody's gotta earn it. Women earn femininity by the hair, the makeup, the being nice, the ha ha ha, laughing at jokes even when they're not funny, right? That kind of shit. That is earning your femininity. I never did. Right? Even when I was modeling, that was performance. And you know, what do? You get labeled a diva the minute you go, like, I can't, like, this is unsafe. You've got a power box right near a puddle. I ain't going out there. Like, I didn't want to get electrocuted. And I got what a diva. Right? It's anytime you advocate, anytime you complain about something, you're less of a woman. No, that is the way it works. And so if you've got somebody who's constantly complaining, that is somebody who's deeply sensitive about it and she's given up, right? You know, that's what it's about. It's, I know I'm a bitch for saying so. Fine, I'm a bitch, and I'm just blah, 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 blah. See, there's no incentive to do it right most of the time and only reserve the complaints for when they're really warranted. Same thing with men. There needs to be an incentive for doing things better. To the people on Friday who actually acknowledged my points, as well as saying, but these guys are crazy, you're not ugly. Thank you. You did, that is, it's fine to say they are objectively wrong on that point. Fine. But you listen to my points and you put them first and foremost. That is all I'm looking for. You guys who only drop a comment to complain, you're being a stereotype. I know you're better than that. You keep watching my content for some godforsaken reason. I have no idea why, because the only time you comment is to shit on something I say. And so guess what? I assume that you're a hate watcher who only comments to shit on something I say. And it's only been recently, like when people could bash Anita Sarkeesian, that people have said, well, at least we think you believe what you say. At least we think you're authentic. Oh my God, you had to shit on another woman for me to find out anything positive you find in my content. Holy fuck, don't do that. I am fine with people being critical. That's why I do Feedback Friday. That's why I address criticisms. But when you are so just bleh about everything, you're being a walking stereotype. Because keep in mind, a woman's entire worth in society right now is whether men will vote for her in an election, because you can't do it with just women. They assume she's going to win the female vote. How do you appeal to men? You can't be in the media unless a critical mass of men want to fuck you. Look at Bella Ramsey on The Last of Us. Like, they're great. What's the focus? How they look. You know? Like, and they knew that. Bella had to be that much better than everybody else who auditioned because they're not sufficiently hot. So when you are that guy who is just negative, well, of course I agree. Well, you're not fucking saying it. And I know this is how men are trained to talk. I know it's not your fault. But if you actually want this women are wonderful stereotype to ebb, you have to start doing your part to not show up actively as an asshole. You cannot complain. Now that you know that it's not about a positive bias towards women, women are seen as neutral. It's a negative bias against men, meaning men are seen as actively bad. And if you show up an angry, aggrieved, critical ball of negativity, you are adding to that. If you truly don't want that, act accordingly. And I will say that some of the guys who brought this up to me, no, they are. This one guy who is working on this, he's like, he He is very positive. He agrees with stuff. Like, he's doing everything right. He's just in one of those more traditionalist echo chambers where, men are terrible is stronger. And that's the other thing, guys. If you move in conservative circles, men are pieces of shit is stronger there than it is in liberal circles. Liberals talk about it. But according to the data, conservative women are way more down, or conservative communities, women in those conservative communities are way more down on men. They just don't tell you. Why? Because they think you're dangerous. This is what I keep saying. If you really believe men are dangerous, you're not going to mouth off to them. I know that because I was raised by an abusive father, and you didn't get in his face until you didn't care anymore. You were just so beaten down that fine, beat me, fine, kill me. At least that's real. You don't get in the face of someone who scares you until you are so scared you can't be scared anymore. So stop being that. Stop allowing that to happen. Say something. Hey man, that ain't cool. Women do it to each other. You just don't see it. And you don't have to do it around women if you don't want to. But you gotta be the change you want to see, not the status quo that hurts you. Like, seriously. Put that, because that's what I do. I'd be making a lot more money if I could just pander to one side or the other. And yeah, I kind of need more money right now, but I am not going to do that. This is too important. We have interest convergence here. There is a path, and we're not going to get the usual suspect feminists, and we're not going to get the worst parts of the manosphere. We need the people that can say, okay, we have some different views on some things, but we all agree that we think both men and women are treated like shit in their own ways. Let's work together. That's all we can control. And the nice thing is we can control it, right? We can. We've got to start centering the good men, which means not letting the bad men get away with it, but not also presuming that a man who seems good today will just heel turn tomorrow. That's not what the data says. It's not. They've never been able to find that. The average man is not abusive. The men who are do it to an average of like 7 women before they get caught. That's the problem. And part of the reason they don't get caught is because that kind of man is normalized. So it's boys will be boys. If we shift what's normal and we actually do start going like, hey, like I said, I appreciate that people put my ideas first, my looks second. Even though it was a complimentary comment on my looks, I really appreciate that you put my ideas first. That meant a lot to me. Thank you. That's all it takes. Appreciating the effort, going, this, you can get it right. It's not just good behavior is assumed and not noticed, and bad behavior is severely punished. It can't. We need compassion. We need to model compassion. We need to teach compassion. It's not compassion for me, but not for thee. You haven't earned it yet. Being compassionate costs you nothing. It doesn't mean you have no boundaries. It doesn't. I've learned that I need to start setting better boundaries so I find out who's misusing my compassion sooner. And holy shit, that's depressing. When you've got CPTSD like I do, the whole thing about boundaries and more boundaries, you need better boundaries. It's like, fuck, it's never enough. It gets so depressing sometimes. But you know, I got people harassing people who come on 2 Women Talking again to badmouth me to them. Now, they're not believed, But it just pisses me off that these are people who are actively trying to take away my free speech rights because they don't like what I say. You know, these are, in this case, this was an American. And it makes no sense. It was just somebody who apparently thought I was an endless well of bullshit eating. And when I called bullshit, he really didn't like it. And do I think that man's normal? No. I think those of you who can disagree with me, and even when I go, okay, you need to stop that right now or we're done, and you respect that and you try to follow it even if you don't get it perfect, you're the ones, I believe, based on data, are the majority. And we need to start acting that way. We need to start asking why people believe what they do. We need to start giving people opportunities to show they're coming at you in good faith. If you think somebody's arguing with you in bad faith, stop talking to them. But I do think people deserve the chance. And I say, look, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to show you're coming at me in good faith. I'm not willing to talk about this issue over here. I'm willing to talk about this issue with you right now because we only have time for so much. If someone follows that, awesome. If someone goes, you can't tell me what I can talk about, my free speech. Okay, we're done. We're fucking done. And, you know, the latest uptick in stalking, the thing he said is I'm a liar. That I lied. And he didn't go, well, maybe there was a misunderstanding. You know, there was no assumption that I truly believed what I was saying, which means I'm not lying. Because, oh no, he explained it to me. He told me. I knew. And the very problem with this person is that he speaks in... And by the time you get to the end, you have no idea what the hell the guy's saying. And so you're like, okay, this, no, and he gets all mad, and then he does it again. But oh no, that woman, she's lying. I was clear, she's lying. She's coming at me. That is hostile. And guys like that are not the norm. And I know that because I talk to enough men. And I see the good. And I see that the good is the norm. Even in men that are struggling. Even in men who may have a few funny ideas. That how dare you bitch reaction is very rare. It's happened to me more times than the average person just because there's a lot of personality disorders in media. But that how dare you bitch. I'm gonna get you. That is not normal. That is unusual. That is irregular. Every man should not be judged by that standard. And I say that as someone who keeps getting hounded by these fucking people. So let's do this. Let's do this as a community. Let's be the better we want to see. Let's be the change we want to see, not the status quo that hurts us. And thank you for coming to my hour-long video. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching. And I don't have it. There we go. Thanks for watching. Manly Mondays. Your support is appreciated. Let's do this. Let's remasculate.